My name is Larry Houg, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1942, and I went to boot camp at San Diego Recruit Depot. And I finished boot camp in early '43 then, and we then went to Camp Matthews for 30 days of KP, kitchen duty in Camp Matthews, a firing range for the Marine Corps. And after that, they gave us our assignments, and you know, the Lord works in mysterious ways, because at that time the war needed infantry, and in fact the whole battalion, or the whole platoon, went to the infantry, but being they do everything by the alphabet, in the middle of the alphabet they picked out Houghton, Hoover, and Houg, and we went to artillery training in Camp Pendleton, California, at Oceanside. And I know that saved my life, because at that early in the war, if I'd been in the infantry, I never would have come back. So we got our artillery training, and we went aboard ship and headed for New Zealand. We didn't know that, they didn't tell us that at the time, but we went all alone by ourselves, one lone ship down along the coast of South America, and to dodge the submarines and so forth. And it was an old Dutch freighter, Sammelstijk, and the crew were Dutch citizens. And one of the details, we had no freshwater showers, saltwater showers, and it gave some saltwater soap. You had to leave a scum on you. You could take your fingernails and rake it off afterwards. And in the bathroom, the restroom then, you know, it was a long metal trough with some boards across it, and they had pumping seawater down through there, and at night you could see the phosphorus going down through that trough. And one of the favorite tricks, somebody would come in with a roll of paper and sit at the upper end, and then he'd light that paper and they'd slide along and singe everybody's butt way through. North of New Zealand, we still didn't know where we were going, but north of New Zealand we hit a very violent storm, and that old Dutch ship would creak and groan, and it would wave side to side. You'd be looking down in the bottom of a trough of water, you'd come up like this, and you'd be looking out at the sky. And at the same time, the front end of the ship would be going down and up like this, and when it would go down, the back end of the ship would come out of the water, and the screw would just be violent, high speed, because the engine then would be wide open, and the whole ship would vibrate and make noise, and then we'd settle down in wave again. So for 3 days they didn't put anything out to eat, because a lot of the guys were seasick, and in the galley they could not put any food out, and so they had apples and oranges. You could go through the line and get apples and oranges if you wanted to. And one day the captain came on the PA system, and he says, "You are now 10,000 miles away from the United States." And I was out in the Pacific 2.5 years, and another time the captain of that ship came on the PA system, and he says, "You are now 600 miles from Tokyo." So I went through 4 battles then, going across Central Pacific, and we took additional training then down in Wellington, New Zealand, and I joined the 2nd Marine Division there, and these fellows had landed August 7th, 1942 on Guadalcanal and Tulagi, and my outfit landed on Tulagi. That's where there was some fierce fighting, so they got bloodied there, and they stayed on Guadalcanal then, and the Navy had pulled out before they got unloaded, and they didn't have very much rations unloaded yet, and so the guys were starving to death and hunting for native food and so forth. And my outfit found a cave with some Japanese pickled mushroom or pickled fish heads and onions, and so they got along on that until they got more food back into them. And those fellows on Guadalcanal really suffered from the jungle diseases. A great many of them got malaria, and when they got to, some even died from malaria, and they get dengue fever, and so it was pretty harsh conditions there, and we were just hanging on by the skin of our teeth at Guadalcanal there, because Japs kept bringing in more and more troops there, and we had control of the seas during the daytime, but at night, and we had the airplanes we had, they called it the Cactus Air Force, and at night the Japs came in with their battleships and airships, and they would unload their troop ships and resupply the island, and we were not getting any resupply. So they were the heroes of the South Pacific to be able to hang on there then until December. From August through December was the tough part. They said shelling from sea was the worst thing they ever experienced, when the big battleships would pump in those 16-incher guns, and the shells would, they'd try to bomb the airport, or to shell the airport all the time and tear that up. And they said they're totally helpless what they could do when they're getting shelled from the sea. So those guys were the heroes of the early days in the Pacific Theater. They hung on there. Finally, the Japs had so many killed and starved to death that they gave up and they withdrew. Then they pulled back to the remote part of the island and withdrew all their troops. So then in January 1943, the 1st Marine Division went to Australia for rest camp, and the 2nd Marine Division went to New Zealand, Wellington. And they had 3 different camps down there, Camp McKay, Camp Paikakariki, and Camp Patanui. So that was just like coming home practically, because the New Zealanders had been shelled by the Japanese in 1942, and they were threatening to come ashore, and all the men in the army in New Zealand, Churchill had asked for them to come and fight for him early in the war in North Africa. So all their men were in North Africa, and there's just the old men and women and children left there, and they felt pretty defenseless. And then when the Marines landed August 7th, 1942, in Guadalcanal, that stopped the bombing of Australia and New Zealand, and so they welcomed the Marines with open arms. They realized that they had actually saved their lives in their country. So they were very, very grateful. After more training then, we went up to Hawke's Bay and made practice landings and so forth. We loaded up aboard ship. This was a USS Sheridan, and we went up to New Hebrides and made some practice landings, and then took off again. Then finally they told us that we were going to go in our first battle at the Gilbert Islands, right on the equator, and their main island was called Tarawa. Its code name, wartime name, was Helen, and the native name of the island was Batio. So Japs had fortified that. That was the extent east through the Pacific as far as they had gone, and they had heavily defended that because they wanted to maintain that, and they were building a new airport there, and if they had got that built, then they would have been able to fly and bomb the supply ships going to Australia and New Zealand and cut off that route. So the Japanese general bragged that this was the most heavily defended battle or island at that time in the world, and he said 1,000,000 men could not take this island in 100 years, and it's a battle that the Marine Corps nearly lost because the intelligence was wrong, and there was the island was part of an atoll there that sprung like a reverse L, and ringing it was a coral reef out there, and they happened to hit that extremely low tide, and they come in with these small boats with Marines aboard them, and they couldn't get over that coral reef. And General Julian C. Smith, the commandant of the Secondary Division, realized that was a possibility, and so he asked for 100 amphibious tractors, amphibious tanks, and Admiral Turner, who was in charge of the advancing troops, he said no, and finally they fought back and forth, and finally General Smith said, well, no Amtraks, no deal. And so then he says, well, I'll get 100 Amtraks in, send out from the States, and we'll meet you there at the island. So he did, but when he got there, he gave 50 of the new Amtraks to the 27th Army that was going to make an attack the same time we did on Tarawa, make it up at Macon there. And that was lightly defended, and but they took 50 of the new Amtraks, and we had 75 to start with, and so they could go right over that coral reef and go on in. But the Japs, pardon my language, but this is the language of the day, yep. And they had completely zeroed in that bay there then, and like they said, it was heavily defended. So you get a Amtrak or a Higgins boat in a certain spot, they had that zeroed in, and they had to just they'd fire their anti-boat guns, and you'd see a boat or an Amtrak just poof explode in the air, bodies and pieces flying around, completely disappear. So many of the men also would get out of the Higgins boats on the coral reef there, and they had them trying to wade in through shoulder-deep water, and then there was a lot of bomb pits out there and deeper spots, and they'd be trying to wade in, and they step in a deep spot, and most of them were so heavily weighted down with gear then that they would sink and drown. And so the original plan was completely destroyed the way the going to the shore was, and many of the officers were killed, and the landing people that got ashore, either waiting or on an Amtrak, they were all scattered, and the original beaches that they had selected were not able to keep their units together. So here was individual Marines that would finally get there, and here was a seawall about 12 feet high, and it'd be at low tide, quite an expanse of sand out towards the water. And that's what they had to protect them. And so that first night, there was one long docking dock that extended out into the bay there, and the troops would come in and wade ashore along with that. And that first night then, that was our only bit of ground that we had, was that sand from that seawall back out to the water. And that was littered with dead bodies, and dead bodies floating in the water, and wrecked machinery and boats and Amtraks. And if the Japs had counterattacked that first night, they could have pushed us right off the island. But it so happened that first day the naval gunfire had destroyed their wiring communication system, tore up the wires, and the Japanese military people were brutally trained, and they didn't do anything without somebody of higher authority telling them what to do. And so when the Japanese soldier was by himself, he was not aggressive. He didn't know what to do, except they all had been trained as infantry, and they prided themselves on being able to shoot the Marines in the head. That's what they liked to do. They liked to shoot them in the head. And the Americans were all scattered and mixed up, and they could not evacuate any wounded that first day in the hot sun. And that first night, well, the wounded just received a preliminary first aid, and then they lay there in that hot sun and baked, and by night they could not evacuate them, get them back out to the hospital ships. So they basically laid there all night, and many of them died, and then the next morning they finally got things under control enough so that they could float them back out on rubber boats out to the coral reef and get them started back to the hospital ships. But here it was intense training and discipline is what carried that battle, because individual Marines and groups of Marines fought individually, and the one man that took charge and kept some semblance of control was Colonel David Shoup, and he had done a lot of the planning for the layout of the battle and so forth. But he'd been hit in the leg with shrapnel, and he got cut with coral, and his leg became infected, and it was very painful. But that first day and that night and the second day, he was a man that held that thing together. Your first dead man you see, dead Marine you see, leaves a big impression on you, and your first battle leaves a big impression on you. And again,
how long were you on the island?
Well, the Marines, there's 5,000 Japs there. These were the Japanese Imperial Marines that in 1937 they had taken part in the rape of Nanking. And they're big 6-foot-tall Japanese, the very best they had. And there's a very good book out about it called The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chang. And if you read that, it gives you a good background of the thinking of the Bushido Code of the Japanese soldier and everything. And Japan had not lost a battle for 400 years. And they had won everything so far. They thought they were invincible. And so these were the Imperial Marines that had been at Nanking in 1937, and I think, what, 3 million Japs they had, or Chinese they had killed then through a period of about 10 months there. So, in 76 hours, the 2nd Marine Division had killed those 5,000 Japanese Imperial Marines, and at the end of them, a lot of them committed suicide. They'd hold their rifle and stick their, be laying there and stick their big toe in the trigger and shoot themselves. And they had killed 1,100 U.S. Marines and wounded 2,000, and we had killed the 5,000 Japs, and we took 17 prisoners, Japanese prisoners, and then they had a lot of Korean laborers, slave laborers there. There was a group of Japanese that throughout the battle they had been leaving and going, particularly at night, going out to the other 22 islands in this atoll, and quite a number, we didn't know how many, had escaped that way and gone fleeing up through the islands there. And so Colonel Raymond Murray, his battalion of 6 Marines of the 2nd Marine Division, Red Inland Reserve, they took our battery of artillery. We had the 75mm pack howitzers, and so our battery went with them. We made a forced march and went up and waded across between islands, and you could feel the sand sharks bumping your legs. And they said, well, don't mind them, the sand sharks won't hurt you. And later on I found that they will. But we went with their infantry then, and this was the 4th night of the landing, and just before dark that first night we made contact with the Japs, and so in the morning then we had a pitched battle there, and we killed, I think it was 146 Japs were up there, and we lost some men, and the infantry lost a lot of men, but that cleaned it up. And the natives were good-looking natives, and they helped us a lot. They kept right along with us then. In fact, sometimes there's so many that get in the way, but they were very good to help identify that no Japanese was coming through the lines or anything like that. So that ended that. And so now the 2nd Marine Division was all shot to hell. Morale was very low because every outfit had lost so many of their men and their friends and buddies, and we went back aboard ship, and so happened I went back aboard ship again on the USS Sheridan again, and it had been turned into a hospital ship, and they had wounded in the officers' staterooms and so forth, and the galley, and the tables there, and so several of them died on the trip then to a rest camp, and I participated in some of these burial at seas, and it's a very impressive ceremony and very emotional. And you hold they were sew the body up in canvas and put a 5-inch shell with their tied around their feet so that for weight, and they lay them on a stretcher, and they put the foot, the end with the feet then on the rail of the ship, and 2 Marines stand at the other end and hold the end of the stretcher during the ceremony, and that's what I did several times there. And when the ceremony is ended, then you raise that end up until the body slides off into the deep. So we went then and landed on the big island of Hawaii, and Hilo's capital there. We landed there and we went by railroad and truck then up to the Parker Ranch, which is the second largest cattle ranch in the world, next to King Ranch in Texas. And
how'd you get back to Texas?
Right.
How'd you get back to Texas?
No, I say that the Parker Ranch is second to the King Ranch in Texas.
Okay. And the Parker Ranch is in Hawaii.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we arrived up there as a volcanic ash scale there, and we built a rest camp then. There was nothing. There was no streets, no housing or anything, so we set up 8-man tents and built a rest camp then. And we were pretty high in altitude, and it's like up in the mountains you'd get sudden showers, and it's very dusty, and we used to bitch about it. We say it's the only place in the world where it'd be raining, the sun is shining, and blowing dust all at the same time. The morale was very low then. It was a sad Christmas, and people had lost so many buddies, so General Julian C. Smith knew he had to do something, so he got together with the officials of the Parker Ranch, and they organized a 2-day rodeo. And the cowboys from the Parker Ranch and the Marines then competed in that, and they had built up just like rodeo with the stalls and everything, and did bulldogging and bronc riding and everything, with beer and barbecue. We'll lie down, Sam. And just pull all the stops out, and for 2 days there, just like a big celebration. That kind of got the guys focused again, got them straightened out, and we had replacements by that time. Started training again, and by May then we boarded ship again, and we left Hilo and went over to Pearl Harbor, and the ships were just packed into Pearl Harbor, and so they rafted them out in open water. 6 ships tied together out in open water there, and we tied up over in the part of Pearl Harbor called West Lock, and that's when the second tragedy at Pearl Harbor happened. And have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay. It was the best kept secret in the Pacific throughout the war, because one Sunday morning an ammunition ship blew up and took the 2 ships on each side of it, sank them, and exploded, and a big ball of fire went up in the air there, and there was a photographer on shore that took movies of it, and you can buy a copy of that day then, when the ships were blowing up and exploding and guys jumping overboard and everything, and small boats were in there plucking them out of the water and the oil, and all of our medical men, the doctors and corpsmen, went from our ship over there to help, and we lost 400 or 500 Marines and a lot of sailors, and we were combat loaded. We were heading for the Mariana Islands. We didn't know that yet, but they had to pick up Marines then to fill those vacant spots, so they rounded up off the troops on the Hawaiian Islands, truck drivers and cooks and bakers and everything, and put them in with the combat trained troops, and we took off then for Saipan in the Mariana Islands. And the island of Saipan, capital was called Garapan, and another town was called Characanoa. And they'd been shelling that, bombing it by air, and we came in and made the initial amphibious assault land on Saipan. And it was, again, the Japs had the beach steered in, and we came in at night, and that helped us, and set up and started firing. And on Tarawa, like I said, we had the 75 mm pack howitzer, and after Tarawa, our battalion, three batteries of artillery, this whole battalion then became corps artillery, and attached to the 5th Amphibious Corps. And that way, with these heavy guns, the 155 mm howitzer, which would shoot a 6-inch projectile weighing 100 pounds, and we could support any division that needed us, that wanted us. So they all wanted us for combat, but we found out afterwards, after combat, they didn't want to support us. They didn't want to house us and feed us and so forth like that. So it's kind of battle sometimes that way. But we landed then on Saipan with 155s, and it was pretty fierce battle. And one day we realized it was the 4th of July, 1944, and so that, well, we better do something. We were on standby. We weren't doing any firing, and there's some chickens running around, you know, the natives had had, and so we run down 2-3 of those and gutted them and took the feathers off and cooked them over campfire. We celebrate the 4th of July, and kept holding them and turning them, and I figured they were ready. Got ready to eat them. And here's this was tough and stringy. You couldn't even eat them. So on the 6th of July, then we had the biggest banzai attack in the South Pacific occur on Saipan then, and something like 5,000 Japs organized and came down. We had just switched the front lines the day before. We'd gotten the battle going pretty good, and we were moving up through the island, and there's kind of like a ridge and a mountain in the middle there called Tapacho, and moving along pretty good. And so the front lines range have been replaced by the Army, and a day later, here comes this banzai attack early in the morning, and they broke through the Army lines and came back and hit the first line of Marine artillery, which was 105 guns, and they stood their ground and cut the fuses down to 0.4 of a second and fired flat trajectory right into the Japanese troops coming, and still didn't stop them, and they overcome the battery. So they spiked the guns so they could not be used, and fought them as infantry, fought hand to hand, and with that and some reinforcements that were getting there by that time, they stopped that banzai and wiped out those Japs. And in the States, they told us that in 155 rate of fast fire was 3 rounds a minute. And on Saipan, when he got fire at will, we were shooting 8 rounds a minute. That figures out about 7 seconds a shot where you handle that big 100-pound projectile, and you have to put powder bags in and everything. And in the tropics there, it rain every day, just about like clockwork. 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 9 o'clock at night, you'd have a cloudburst. Just open up the skies and have a cloudburst. And a lot of jungle diseases. I got dengue fever, which they call breakbone fever, and you get an extremely high temperature, and everything in your body, all your joints ache, your eyeballs ache. If you touch your hair, even gently, it hurts. And you're laying there with the gun battery, and laying there, and by the end of the second day, you think you're going to die, and the third day, you wish you would die. And but after the first 5 days, you got through that, then you started to recuperate. So along with the Japs, we fought the jungle diseases and ulcers and so forth.
How long were you on Saipan?
30 days.
30 days, okay.
Mm-hmm. And that was where the Japs had told the natives that the Marines were vicious killers, and they'll take your babies and they'll cut your throats and skin you alive. And the natives were totally scared of us then, and they had moved with the Japanese way up to the northern end of the island where there were steep cliffs.
Well, we were at the point where they were telling the native people that the Marines would take them.
Okay.
And they went up on the island with...
And they went up on the cliffs there. So on the left.
Yep. And
there we go. So they took their children and their babies, and they'd throw them off the cliff, and then they'd leap off afterwards. And there was boats down below there, and there were rocks, so they couldn't get close, and just the mangled bodies there. And we had interpreters who could speak Japanese, and they went up there and would plead with them to we'll take care of you, we'll give you food, and they would have no part of it. They just kept on jumping off there, and I don't think they have any account of how many did jump off that cliff, but that was a sad situation. So we finished up Saipan, and we had about 3-4 days rest, and started combat loading aboard ship again. And we went down, and I think our battalion of Corps Artillery was probably the only combat outfit that made the initial assault landing on Saipan. We went down and made the initial assault landing on Guam. And Guam had been a U.S. position before, and they had a Marine barracks there. In fact, one of the fellows from my hometown, Russ Ormsett, had been captured there when they took, Japanese took it then, the 8th of December, 1941, right after December 7th. And he was a prisoner of war then in Japan all the way through the war. And after the war, I went to visit him and asked him, well, how did they treat you? He said, well, I said, I was lucky. I was short, small, like they were, and they didn't bother me much. But he said the big guys, he just hated them, and they would just beat the hell out of them, and really made life miserable for the POWs. and not give them very much rations. It'd be making soup out of grass and a little bit of rice and everything to get a piece. Sometimes all they'd get would be a watery cup of rice. So they, many prison camps then, just like on the Philippines, prisoners there, they turned into skeletons and walking skeletons, and I think in Europe, the prisoners of war there's something like 6% of the prisoners died, and in the Japanese American prisoners of war, something like 36% of the prisoners died. I saw some of them in Hawaii after the war, and they were just walking skeletons. So that's why it's memories of that is why we decided to make this Freedom Defenders Veterans Memorial in Bemidji here, and it was out of loyalty and honor and respect and will to never have it forgotten. So we have that Veterans Memorial down by the Guam County History Center on the end of Minnesota Avenue. So we now had landed on Guam, and our outfit got the Presidential Unit Citation there because we supported the 1st Marine Provisional Brigade that took the point where the Marine Barracks had been before, and the natives, the Chamorros, had been knowing the Marines and Americans there before the war, and the Japanese had driven them up further up the island ahead of them, and also had concentration camps up there, and they treated those women and children just horribly. You'd see a little girl 10, 11 years old carrying a baby, and maybe she's pregnant again. And so they had really suffered. And when they released them from those concentration camps, Marines put them in trucks, open trucks, and they're standing in your open trucks, and they'd come back through the front lines, and they'd be singing, "You Are My Sunshine." And that was quite a moment when you're busy, you've been fighting hard, and then the truckloads of civilians come back through.
When they were in the truck, where were they going?
Down to the beach. They went on the beach there.
To the hospital ship?
Well, they were using the hospital ships for the Marines,
okay,
but they would supply them with food and clothing and bedding and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how long were you on Saipan?
30 days.
Again, okay.
Yeah, no, 30 days.
And on Guam, I mean.
Guam, yeah.
Okay.
30 days there.
And then after Saipan?
And Saipan and Guam, and then went aboard ship. And, you know, we'd live on K-rations, that little cardboard box, yeah, like a Cracker Jack box. That, during the landings, and later on when the fighting was going pretty good, we'd get 10-in-1 rations with the cans with deviled eggs and little frankfurters and Spam, and but any hot chow like that was really delicious and appreciated. But the thing was, after fighting for 30 days like that, and well, it was practically 60 days there with Saipan and Guam continuous like that, and you get aboard ship, and of course they had a big meal for you, and you were happy to taste that good food, you'd overeat, and then your stomach would react, and you could get sick and throw it up. So
Then from Guam?
went back to Hawaii again, Big Island,
Yep.
and started training again, and had replacements, and we combat loaded then again, and took off. Then on the way, they told us that we were on the way to Iwo Jima, and so we had a 45-day ride on the LSTs, and it was a pretty good ride. One incident on Saipan there, Dick Evanoff from Minneapolis and I came by a cave, and we heard some puppies whining, and so we found out that that there were two little puppies in there, quite young yet, and so we took them back to the battery with us, and I think one Tinian and one Saipan, and Tinian died, but we kept Saipan with our gun battery, and you were never supposed to take them aboard ship, but when we loaded them from Saipan to go down to Guam, I stuck the puppy inside my shirt here, and our khaki shirts was our only armor in World War II. So I put them inside my shirt and went up the deck and took them aboard ship, and we hid them aboard ship then, and come to go down to land at Guam. I put them inside my ship again, went down the net and into the boat. He stayed with us. She stayed with us all the time. It's a good watchdog. She really valuable. And so on the docks down at Hilo, when we're getting ready to go to Iwo Jima, she got red, and she had 5 little puppies on Iwo Jima. And they did not survive, but when we left then, we took her with us again off Iwo Jima, and after we got back to the States then, Jim Stewart from Maine, he took her with him aboard a train and went clean across the United States up to Maine with Saipan.
Now, when you left Saipan, who took the island over then? The Army then took over when you guys left?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, where were you then when the war ended?
I was combat loaded for Japan, and so I blessed Truman for ordering the atomic bomb, because he saved my life and he saved thousands of Marines, and plus millions of Japanese women and children who had been ordered to defend it to the death. And so we made the landing on Iwo Jima.
Is this where one of the landings were?
Yeah, that's where the landings were. And that's where the Japanese had decided not to fight them on the beaches, but they had fortified that island. They back off the beaches, and it had been used as a mining for sulfur for centuries, I guess, by the Japanese, and there's miles of tunnels under there. And so for the bombing and the shelling.
Can you put your arm down? The watch is making stuff in your face.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep, miles. Tunnels.
Yep. So they had been, they called it Sulphur Island. It had been mined sulfur there for many years, and so the Japanese had set up defenses inside these tunnels, and defended back through the hills and the ridges, and in a strange battle, they were underground and we were above ground, and you never saw them, but they had targets an opportunity. They could shoot out through openings, and again they prided themselves on shooting range in the head. And how close did I come to death? About 1 inch, because I had come across the mouth of a cave, and I tipped my head with a helmet over against the rock wall here, and he tried to shoot me in the head, and he went a little too far, and he hit the rock wall and sprayed my cheek with rock chips. So we were first 5 days on Iwo Jima didn't go good. We'd been busy firing, and we went ashore the second night, and set up and were firing on Mont Sabrachi with our 6-inch shells. And after 5 days, then when that flag went up, somebody said, "There's a flag on top of Sabrachi." We looked up, and here was the American flag flying up there, and that was a big release of emotion. And you should have heard that whole island cut loose. The guys were firing in the air, and trucks and jeeps were blowing their horns, and the ships offshore were blowing their whistles and their sirens, and just pandemonium for a while. But it's a huge release of equipment.
Your watch is showing up in the...
Oh, I'll take it off.
Okay.
Thank you. So that was an occasion where it really was a release of emotion.
Where were you when the flag went up? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was halfway between Mont Sabrachi and the first airstrip there.
Oh.
I don't know what the distance was,
Yeah.
but
But you could see it from where you were?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Another time when they had a big release of emotion, when we first landed on Saipan, the Japanese were coming in bombing us at night then, and they bombed the beaches particularly, and they hit the 2nd Raid Division ammunition dump on the beach there one night, and that was a big flare up, and so then they got the 40mm anti-aircraft batteries ashore. So then Japs just fly up a little higher, out of range of the 40mm, and continue bombing. Well, then a couple more days, and they got the 90mm anti-aircraft battery ashore there. And that first night, then here come the first 2 bombers along, and all of a sudden, blam, blam, and that guy, or the 90s cut loose, and he hit both bombers at the same time there. And one of them went right down, one got fired. He made a big blazing circle out over the top of the island and then disappeared on the other side there. But he was burning all the time. He kept rising and making a big circle. And again, it was a release of tension. And guys were cheering, and this was the middle of the night, yet they were cheering, and it was a relieved attention. You know, in combat, it's not an 8 to 4 job or a daylight to dark. It goes on 24 hours a day, and there's no bedtime, no meal time. You eat a little bit when you can, if you feel like it, and one time on Saipan, I realized I hadn't slept for 72 hours, but I still didn't know when I was going to get some sleep.
Okay, so the plane went over the hill and crashed, and everybody
made
a big hurrah.
And then another time on Guam, just at dusk, ships were getting ready to pull out to sea. They'd leave at night. And just as they were getting ready to pull out to sea, we were up on top of the ridge. We could see the bay and the ships from there. And here come a lone Jap fighter, just skimming the trees right over the top of that ridge. And he went down real low, right in between the ships, and they couldn't lower their trajectory enough. And he just went through and they were all shooting at him, just dark enough so that you could see all the tracers and everything going up, just a white sheet of, or a yellow sheet of shells going up. And he threw them all and went out to sea.
And he didn't fire a round?
Yeah, well, he didn't fire at anybody, but they couldn't get him because of the big surprise, and he was so low that they couldn't. They could shoot up in the air, but they couldn't shoot where he was.
Wonder where he was going out to sea.
Yeah, he went out to sea there, and I don't know what became of him.
Huh.
But then in a few minutes, all this stuff then started coming down again, right on top of us. So we had to stand under trees and everything, and have your helmet on, and for the rain of steel coming back down that they'd shot up in the air at him. After Iwo Jima then, General Holy Mad Smith was the overall commander of the Marines there. I think some of the parents and congressmen got passed a word through there. And so in this unit, like I said, we were for artillery, we were an independent unit. And so they disbanded the battalion then and sent the men home. And the guns they sent to the 5th Marine Division, and they went back to Camp Tarawa then in Hawaii on the Big Island, and they took 2 men from each gun battery and sent them back with the gun then to help train their men on 155s. And so I was sent back as instructor on one of the guns, and then after training we were combat loading, getting ready to move moving forward in getting ready for Japan. So like I say, I was very, very grateful that the atomic bomb was dropped.
Now, where were you when the bomb was dropped? Were you still in the States then training?
I was still in Hawaii.
Hawaii training.
Still training.
So you hadn't got on the boats yet?
I hadn't got on it.
Okay, but you were training in Hawaii for it.
Yep.
And did they ever tell you at what point you were going to be embark to go on the boat?
No, they didn't. They didn't. I suppose the higher ups knew, but
okay.
The troops didn't know.
So once the bomb landed in Japan, then what happened to you and your guys? Where'd you go?
Well, I had over 2 years overseas then, so they went as occupation duty to Japan. They landed at Sasebo, and
you were there, occupation?
No, I stayed at rear echelon in Hawaii then.
Okay.
And because I had more than 2 years overseas, and they were preparing to send me back to the States. And so when I finally did, I went back to the States on USS Maryland, a battleship. And, you know, during the war, we never knew when we'd get back there, but we always had some slogan that we'd yell out at each other. And one of them was back alive in 45. And another one was the Gold Gate in 48. And so it was kind of our dream then always to come back to the States and come under the Golden Gate. But this battle wagon in Maryland went back to San Diego. So I never did see the Golden Gate.